Welcome to the Healers Café, the #1 show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. So, welcome to the Healers Cafe. Today I have with me Josh Mathe, and he is a coach. He's an award-winning author, a fitness expert, a nutritionist, an ultra endurance athlete, and then basically a life adventurer. And I love your statement, squeezing every drop from life. So, welcome to our podcast. And I guess my first question to you is what started you down, I guess, the fitness nutrition journey?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I love this stuff. I'm really passionate about helping people and people stepping into the strongest versions of who they are. That's kind of what I do with all those hats that I wear. And how I became passionate about that is the answer to your question. It's because I grew up a overweight kid, not really paying attention to my food or my fitness, which would kill my mom to hear me say that because she's always been really into this stuff, and I just wasn't when I was a kid because for whatever reason, because kids often aren't. So I was not really healthy, but I was a baseball player, and
Mm,
that was the place that I felt safe and okay and good, because we grew up in Los Angeles, which just felt really big and overwhelming and scary to me. I had a lot of anxiety, which I did not label as anxiety back then. It took me until fairly recently, actually, to realize, oh, wow, I was a really anxious kid. So baseball was my sanctuary, and unhealthy food was my sanctuary. And we moved to Northern California for my high school, which felt much it felt like a much safer place. It felt like my kind of place.
mm,
And during high school baseball, I got made fun of for being overweight, and it was the first time I realized, oh, maybe I'm not okay, which is really sad.
mm,
But it was the first time I really started looking at, huh, I don't look the way everybody else does necessarily. People are paying attention to what my body looks like. I'm not sure how I feel about this. So it was the first time that conversation started.
mm,
And luckily, I went in a pretty healthy path. I mean, it took some right turns that weren't great, but I got really passionate about running, and I got passionate about eating well. And I really felt strongly the link between when you take care of yourself, good things can happen.
mm,
Because I started feeling stronger, I started looking better, I started having more energy, I started playing better baseball. Um, Girls started noticing me. So that kind of started the, oh, wow, maybe there's something here.
mm.
And, then it, it's gone in many different directions since then. I have a master's degree in nutrition, and I started doing endurance sport, not baseball. And we can talk about as much of that stuff as you want. But that's really where it started, was from
Mm.
unhealthy to, oh, wow, maybe there's something here. I would love to help other people kind of connect with what I connected with.
Hmm. Well, and it's interesting. It's like it's a disconnection, really. You're disconnected that what you eat might actually impact your body, right?
Right.
I mean, it's funny when once you're on the other side, it's like, what was I thinking, but I
Yeah.
think it's actually very common.
Very common.
It's like
And
we're generally disconnected. We're not really putting two and two together easily.
I think I work with a lot of college athletes, and
Mm,
I was actually just talking with a group of entrepreneur students who are trying to bring healthier food to campus. It was a great conversation, but we were talking about how the social consciousness, at least at that age, has shifted. Most 20-year-olds are pretty darn aware that what they eat affects their bodies, that exercise is important. It's pretty connected for that generation, which gives me hope. because it definitely wasn't connected for my generation. It really wasn't connected for my parents' generation. So, whether that knowledge and connection actually leads to behavior change is another conversation. But
Right.
I think people are understanding more clearly and in broader numbers that this stuff really matters.
Mhm. Yeah, you would think that they would start teaching it to regular doctors, but they still don't.
Yeah, you would think that. Pretty amazing.
But anyways, no, but no, I think there is a change for sure. And I think, I've heard, younger people say too, oh, I need to get my outdoors fix because otherwise I
Yeah.
get depressed. And it's like, wow, okay. Again, putting another two and two together, so eh, yeah, because you're coaching people to get through this. So what are the obstacles that most people have uh, implementing it? Let's go to they're aware, but not yet there. So what do you do to help them?
That is a loaded question, and that's what I spend most of my days doing. And I think I'm pretty good at it. If I was perfect at it, I would be a trillionaire because that's like the golden question, right? Like, how do you help people, or how do I, as a human who's trying to change, actually implement that stuff that I know I'm supposed to do? So, kind of the broad answer to your question is I really try to meet people where they're at. I try to take a very holistic approach. People usually come to see me through the lens of I want to get fitter. I want to be doing strength training, or I want to be eating better. That's usually how people find their way to me. Sometimes they find their way to me because I've done mindset coaching with somebody and they got referred to me, but usually it's fitness and nutrition. But however they come to me, I really try to start a conversation about their holistic happiness, their whole life.
Mhm.
Bicep curls are awesome and eating broccoli is awesome, but I really try to also help people connect with what is the state of family and friends and connections in your life. What are you
Mhm.
doing with your brain every day? How is your spiritual health? This is what my third book was about, Forging Discipline.
Mhm.
It's about, we have all of these parts of self and all of these parts of our lives that are really important to fully express to achieve happiness and fulfillment. So no matter how somebody finds me, I'm always trying to start a conversation about kind of their life as a whole, which is by design because I think they support each other. When I eat better food and exercise, it helps give me energy and purpose to
Mhm.
connect with my family and friends more, and to meditate or pray and connect with something bigger than myself more. It gives me more energy to focus on my career and my financial health. They all kind of buoy each other.
Right.
So I really try to meet people where they're at and give them an action plan, or we come up with an action plan together, working on all these parts of life or parts of self. And
Mhm.
then, I just, I'm really an accountability coach. I think that's really important, just helping keep this top of mind and mindful, helping the conversation going. We find a lot of grace.
Mhm.
It's often easy for people to have grace with other people, but very hard for people to have grace with themselves.
Mhm.
So, I start that conversation right at the beginning. You're not going to be perfect. That's okay. Perfect doesn't exist. Perfect is not a necessary goal
Right.
or even a realistic goal, as long as we're moving toward who we want to be more often than not. And, 7 out of 10 times doing things that are taking us in the direction we want to go, we're going to be okay. So I really try to also find other parts of, other voices in their head beside the critic voice, which is very
Right.
strong in Western society, that's just driving us forward with judgment and criticism and sometimes a lot of anger. I try to help people connect with their nurturing voice and their free child voice and their adaptive child voice that just wants to be safe and okay, and then their adult voice that listens to all these other voices and helps them move forward with purpose. So,
Mm,
it's a lot of psychology, a lot of mental and spiritual and emotional work to
yeah.
make change. It's definitely not just about knowing the amount of carbs, protein, and fat you should eat or how many bicep curls you should be doing. It's
Mm.
about fundamentally changing who you are and how you move through the world. So that is why it's fun, but it's also why it's really challenging.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I mean, just as a parallel in my practice too, I do I'm I was a naturopathic doctor, but I predominantly do Bowen therapy, which is a sports technique. But it's like, fix my elbow, fix my shoulder, fix my sciatic. Okay, whatever. Sure. But when you ask the question deeper, why do you want to get better? Right? It's like they look at you like you've come up from outer space, but it's like,
Yep.
because, you know, but if they actually answer it, those that have gone that route, it changes everything.
Yep.
It's like it leads to that whole thing of like, yeah, well, because then I'll be more agile. And if I'm more agile, then it's like their whole dream life becomes possible. It's not just this, 3D, eat your broccoli, eat this vitamin and fix that limb. It's like there's so much more. I really agree with your bigger view of health.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and that makes it fun and that
Yeah.
makes it sticky. That makes it so that the change actually is sustainable. It's really easy to change things short term. It's very hard to change things in a way that brain wiring actually shifts and we are fundamentally somebody else doing different things.
Yeah.
That takes some doing, and like you said, the why is a really fundamental piece of that. Like,
Mhm.
who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I want to move through the world? What's important to me? And how do all of these things play into that? That creates full engagement, which creates real fundamental change.
So I'm curious, your third book, it's called Forging Habit.
Forging discipline.
Oh, discipline. Okay,
Yeah,
forging discipline.
12 months, 12 challenges, one badass you. So I created 12 chapters with 12
Yeah.
different challenges, all these challenges looking at these different parts of life. And I created different challenges 1 month at a time that build upon each other to help you really dive into this stuff and work on for an entire year
Mhm.
who you want to be and practicing these skills. So it's called Forging Discipline, which sounds very like rigid and maybe not fun, but the whole thing is about change should be fun. Discipline should be fun. Like, fully expressing all of yourself should be fun. Life is too short not to have a good time with this stuff. So it's just really about exploring all these things.
Right.
And I wrote it because I thought I had something to say about it,
Mm.
and because I thought it would help people. And the response has been great. People are really enjoying it. And I gave different levels for each challenge. If you're a financial wizard, maybe you start at the advanced on the financial chapter. But if you've never worked out before in your life, maybe you start at the beginner and the physical chapter. So really, you could go through this thing for 2 or 3 years at a time, just leveling up your game every time. And people have been doing that, and it's really fun to watch.
Mm. Yeah, no, what caught me is the word forging. And, kind of the double entendre meaning, there's the forging, which is the, forcing in a sense, creating the path, but it's also a word in forgery, right?
Mm.
And there is an understanding in mindset, in a sense, that you have to live into the you want to be,
Well said. Yeah.
right? Which is a type of forgery because you're not there yet. You
Yeah.
know?
It's a creation.
It's a
Yeah.
creation.
And it is a leaning into that story and that energy and that mindset.
Yeah.
And I absolutely agree that that is a really important piece of how we create change, is
Mhm.
believing that that's possible and walking toward it as if it's already who you
There, yeah.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you know about Chris Duncan. We're Not Broken, I think was his book, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah. I
very
have heard of that. I
many,
haven't read it.
yeah, uh, many different people come to that. He just happens to be a good teacher of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's interesting. I thought it was a brilliant name, especially with the word discipline afterwards, because people have so many preconceptions of what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought about calling it something that sounded more fun, but I called it that because that's really the title that resonated with me as I was writing it.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
what do you believe about discipline? What, like, let's say, like, I had a conversation with my sister, and this is nowadays, not when I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, or even 50s, okay? So later. But she's doing Zumba classes, and she's off at 5 o'clock, jogging, and then she's doing this and she's doing that. And I'm like, wow, you know, how do you do that? I have zero desire to do that. I'll sit and, look at the world through the window and meditate, no problem. You know, I'll go for walks, but it's like, oh, good music, I'll dance. But it's like, to put my alarm on and do that, it's just like, so I keep saying it's not me. It's just not me. It's not who I am. And I mean, when I was at a different time, it was who I was. I loved it. I went, did Pilates 5 times a week. It's not that I haven't been there, right? But how much do you know that you're self-sabotaging, and making like good sounding stories that you believe, or that you're listening to yourself, that you're really actually going, what, maybe right now this is not what you need. So what do you tell people, like, if I were your client?
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
That is an excellent question because I think the answer is it's usually some of both, which makes it very hard and very nuanced. There is definitely a piece of all of us that are trying to let ourselves off the hook, that don't want to work hard, that are betting on our future selves, right? We all want to be healthy and fit, but we don't want to run today. We are going to count on Friday's self to get out and finally run. Our future self is going to feel like doing it, but my Tuesday self does not feel like doing it. My Tuesday self wants to sit on the couch and watch Game of Thrones and eat ice cream. But when we get to Friday, that is now our current self that also still doesn't feel like running. So there's a lot of that we do. In this kind of area, I like to tell people, when you notice yourself bargaining, when
Mhm.
you notice yourself um, uh, negotiating with yourself, that is a good red flag that there's some disconnect. There's some incongruence there. There's some voice. I don't like necessarily the term self-sabotaging. I'm not sure that's exactly what we're doing, but for simplistic reasons, I think there is a voice that is kind of sabotaging ourselves. And that's the voice that is speaking, that is driving the bus. I think when we are negotiating with ourselves, like, well, I've So that might sound like, I had a really hard day. I've been working really hard. I deserve to sit on the couch and watch a show and not go for a walk. I can go for a walk tomorrow. I had 3 meetings today. We're laying the case to ourselves, right? We're lawyering ourselves, and we all do that every day in different ways. So I like to have people just become aware and mindful of this conversation. Like, oh, I'm negotiating with myself right now. There's something here. Let me just step back and take a look at this conversation. Just doing that can often be enough for people to more often than not go, oh, you know what? I realize that I'm negotiating with myself right now. I'm just going to get out and walk. The other thing, so there's a lot of things to do here. It is possible to change what you like, right? There's people who love what you hate. This is one of the 6 sources of influence. I don't know if you've ever read the book Change Anything. Great book by a group of Stanford psychologists about how we can literally change anything. And one of their sources of influence is this kind of personal motivation piece. There are people who love to run for hundreds of miles. There are people who love broccoli. There are people who love everything that you hate. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to love those things, but you can learn to like those things more than you do now, or to tell yourself a different story about those things, or to create a different relationship with those things. So it is possible to go, I know strength training is really important for me as I get older. I need to have a different relationship with this because I just need to start doing it 3 days a week, regardless of how I feel about it. So you can gamify that to make it more fun. You can track progress. You can get an accountability partner where you guys hold each other accountable once a week, and maybe you put something on the table to make that more fun. So there are ways to make it more fun and to make it more sticky and to make yourself do it. And once you start doing it, that changes the brain wiring and it makes it easier to do it. It changes your identity a little bit. And every time you do it, and every time you make yourself do it when you don't want to do it, that changes brain wiring. So it is possible. And I agree with you. There's an element of sometimes maybe this just isn't me. If you set a goal to run a marathon and you've been trying to make yourself train for that for 2 years and you just won't do it, maybe that's not the right goal for you. Maybe an honest assessment of what you're willing to do and not willing to do is warranted. And maybe you find something else that would still fulfill the reasons you would do that, that feels more like you and is more fun. I'm definitely a fan of, as I said earlier, life is too short to not do things that are fun. Or to do things that aren't fun. Life is too short. So if we can't make it fun, I would say figure out a way to make it fun or change your goal. Or just really, really connect with why it matters. If you hate weight training, but you want to be strong and healthy and be able to lift your grandkids and not get osteoporosis, maybe you just struggle through it 3 days a week for 20 minutes at a time, focusing on why you're doing it.
Oh, yeah, or why, the why. Yeah.
The why. Yep. Yeah. Put pictures of your grandkids up all over your gym and just look at that while you're lifting weights. But that's kind of last resort. I would say try to make it as fun as you can. Train for something, do something with a friend. Give yourself little rewards. There's tons of ways to make it fun, but that's a really important piece when we're trying to do something that's hard or different.
Yeah. It's not my instinctive way of thinking, and to make it fun, that's definitely, it's like I feel like I'm playing games then. But, but it's funny. I took a cryptocurrency course, and the guy was really tough on discipline. He said discipline is the only thing, and if anyone doesn't show up, I don't care who's died or who's whatever, you're out of the course and you got to do your homework, right? And I was like, oh my God, like every flag of mine went up. It's like, this is the antithesis of everything I believe in. But the experiment was worth it. I felt like, oh, this guy is so solidly in his truth about this that I need to check out discipline, and it
Well,
was
and
interesting. Yeah.
sorry, I
Go
didn't mean to
ahead.
interrupt. I was going to add, I think he's right. Discipline is how everything happens. You know,
Yeah.
if you want to save for retirement, you have to save every month. If you want to train for a marathon, you have to run 5 times a week. If you know, nothing happens without doing the work. And it's, we tend to look at the results, the wow, I crossed the finish line, or wow, I have $1 million in the bank. But it's the slow, daily, unsexy progress that just, I did this today, and then I did this same thing tomorrow, and then I did the same thing the next day. That is not sexy. Our brains aren't wired to like that stuff, but that is how progress happens. And
Yeah.
so I would agree with him. However, I would also add, you don't need to be telling yourself a scary or a non-fun story about it. Like, you can do all
No.
of those things and still be congruent with yourself and still make it enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think that's the piece that I like to bring to people, because discipline tends to be very scary for people, especially people who did not grow up exercising that muscle. And
Mhm.
my message is, you can do it and make it you and make it enjoyable.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting. His attitude to that was he did not talk about joy, I promise you. But he says you don't negotiate it. Once you commit, you're in. And then all that kind of chatter, you don't have time for it because your job is to get it done. And it was interesting. I actually did it. I did it that way. That's my first total discipline thing I've ever done.
Nice.
Yeah,
I
it's interesting.
I totally agree with him, and it's not usually that simple. It's great that he was able to present it to you in a way that caused you to go all in.
Right.
But it is usually, you will often, in my experience,
Mm.
you will often turn people off if you,
There's no choice element.
and you can't reach everybody all the time.
No,
But
no.
I usually try to bring a little more grace to the situation so that I can reach more people. Like, I don't know if you've ever
Yes.
heard of David Goggins. Have you
The
ever
name,
heard of David Goggins? So
yeah.
he's a Navy SEAL. He wrote a book called
Oh,
Can't
yeah.
Hurt Me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so he is this amazing guy. He has done just amazing things. And he's like your instructor times 1,000. He's like, don't waste my time with your bullshit. Either do it or don't do it. And I have zero energy for you if you even think about it for a second. Like, step up for yourself or don't.
Right.
And you are not worth my oxygen if you won't step up for yourself. And that
Yeah.
creates, a certain person is really motivated by that. And I think the black white element of that is very intoxicating for all of us. Like, yes, I'm just going to draw a line in the sand and that's it.
Yeah.
And in my experience as a change worker, it is not usually that easy, or that simple.
Yeah. 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 No, I definitely couldn't do that, or what I do, I use logic, or a type of logic. I'll say, here's the thing, we can fix the shoulder. But if you're going to go to the same practice the same way right away before it's healed, you're going to cause the same problem.
Yeah.
So we need to, do some neuro work and change a few things first. So you've got to at least 3 times, um, do this and that and whatever, and then the brain will understand and adapt, and so
Yeah.
it's more gentle, and I think it's more aligned with, you have to align, like you can't force, treatment I personally, I don't think so, I mean, it was just
Yeah.
fun for me because I took it as, actually I did say fun, right? It was fun. But I think, you have to find your own way with all this, and
Yeah, I think the word you used right there was perfect, aligned. Because
yeah.
There is some people that are really motivated by David Goggins and make great changes, and that's awesome. And he's not for everybody, and I'm not for everybody. And like, there's a lot of ways to get where you want to go. So yeah, find a place that feels aligned to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that fear is not, I mean, it's the most popular approach, still mass media approach, it's marketing approach, it's all this, but I don't think they're true motivators, and I think when it comes to health, creating fear is never the right way, personally. You know what I mean? Like,
I would agree with that. It's certainly not my preferred way. It doesn't feel sustainable to me
yeah,
or particularly healthy.
right.
Like, we can do things that externally seem healthy or seem good. But in my mind, if the energy we're bringing to it is not from a healthy place,
Yeah.
then we are perhaps doing ourselves a disservice. Like, if I'm training for a 100-mile race because my demons are driving me and I feel like I have to do 100 miles or I'm not okay and not lovable, I'm not sure that's great. If I'm doing 100 miles because it's fun for me and I can connect with friends while I'm doing it or whatever, like, same result, but bringing a different energy and intention, I think that really matters.
Yeah. And I think the more it's part of your self-care and self-love, that can't be fear-based. Like,
Right.
healing can't
Right.
be fear-based. So, I think
Well said.
mhm.
I agree with you.
So look, we have like 1 minute left. Any last thoughts on this subject, or anything that we haven't covered that you care to share?
uh, I just really love this stuff. I would say there is value in kind of what we were just talking about. I think there's value in exploring who you are and what you're capable of doing. Not capable of doing like getting a PhD necessarily, just what you're capable of, taking your spirit and your body and your soul out for a test drive. Like, I kind of think that's why we're here. And the story I would bring to that and the intention I would bring to that is not, I need to do this stuff because I'm not okay, because I have to prove something to the world or myself. Like, do it because you can, because life is a buffet, and just enjoy the heck out of it and figure out what's important to you and what you like to do and what you're great at and what you're terrible at. Like, just
Yeah.
I would encourage you to experience more and try not to let fear guide you. Try to explore the boundaries of what you are capable of, because you can.
Well, thank you very much, Josh Mathe, and it was great.
Sure. Thank you. This was fun.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.